Hey, what's up, y'all? This is MCM, and you are listening to You're Probably Right podcast. And right now, I'm setting up my equipment. Yeah, this might not be the best episode for someone who's never listened to my podcast before to sit in. But I mean, at the same time, maybe it will be. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows what tickles people's fancy these days? So here I am, just getting my notes out and setting up my digital. This thing is recording, so that's a good thing. It's just let's see, won't even take me that long. Quick like that. You are in episode 203. What's up, my friend? Thank you for popping in. I know you got all kinds of other stuff you could be doing, other places you could be, other people you could be listening to, but hey, you're listening to me, which I find really cool. Episode 203. The truth about self-care. Why it's not selfish. It's survival. Okay. You ever notice people who say you ever notice? I don't know. It's just funny to me, but whatever. You ever notice how people who tell you to just keep pushing are usually the ones who have no problem draining you? The ones who guilt trip you for saying no or give you that look? The ones who benefit from you being exhausted? Society has a funny way of celebrating burnout. We glorify grinding. We act like exhaustion is a badge of honor. But let's be real. When did being tired, overworked, emotionally drained become something to be actually proud of? Probably during slavery. I'm just saying. Today on You're Probably Right, I'm talking about self-care, but not the Instagram version with candles, bubbles, and baths. We're talking about real self-care, the kind that protects your time, your energy, your sanity. We're talking about why setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's survival. Let's dig into it. Okay, so why we feel guilty about prioritizing ourselves. I can say, and just from my personal experience, that I used to see, just examples. Like we go by what we see, what we were nurtured by. And I remember being somewhat of a latchkey kid. If you don't know what that is, Google it. A latchkey kid is just some kid just has a key. And it probably goes back farther than me. But as far as I know, you could be 12, 11, 9, and have a key maybe around your neck. Don't lose that key because you're not going to be able to get in. Anybody who's born probably in the 70s, 80s, know what it is. And of course, after, of course, but know what it is to lose their house key and their parents aren't going to be home for 4 hours. And it happens to be winter. And I'm telling you, the amount of stories that people could probably tell you just from that information alone will let you know and let them know that they are or they were a latchkey kid. But my parents used to work their butts off. My mother worked at a nursing home for 37 years. My dad, while he was in Canada and eligible to work, he worked at what do you call it? CN Rail, which turned into Via, or Via turned into C. I can't remember how it goes. I think it turned into Via after CN. Anyhow, for 22 years, he was an old bean when he came to Canada. Relatively, I guess he wasn't that old, but he was old. Before that, being a Jamaican, he worked in I've said this before, Boston. He worked in England. He worked in Florida. And of course, he worked in Jamaica. Anyhow, my parents used to just work and work and work, and that's all I saw. I used to see my dad sometimes. Well, did I see him? What was it? Something? Sometimes things have been told to you as a kid, and sometimes you think you really experienced it. And then when you look back, it's like, no, you didn't really experience. They told you about that. But I do actually remember being around and my dad coming home at, say, 10, 11 o'clock or something like that. And then being told that whoever didn't come in for the shift, can you come back? And for my dad to do this in Toronto, for people who know Toronto, Scarborough, would know that us living at Victoria Park in Ellesmere, and my dad having to take a bus because he didn't drive a car in this country. He had a license, but no car. Um, he'd have to take the bus to Victoria Park Station and then take what do you call it, the train all the way to Union Station. And it would take a while. And he came home, just came home. There's no cell phone. So where, you're right nowadays, nowadays your boss would call you and you'd be on your way halfway home or something. And they say, hey, Johnny's not coming back, coming in tonight. Can you come back to work? You could just U-turn and come straight back to work. There you go. There's your overtime. But he had to get all the way home in front of a rotary phone on a wire to find out that whoever's not coming in, and then ask him if he can do the overtime overnight shift. And it wouldn't even be overnight because then he would stay for his next one. I guess back in the days you could do whatever. But I mean, looking at probably the taxes that they took out of his check, it probably didn't make any sense. But he just knew, and they just knew, the harder you worked, the more money you could possibly get. You could take care of your bills and you could provide for your family, and it was your responsibility. And they used to work themselves to the bone. And my mother too, except my mother used to not, I don't think she probably did overtime, but not very often. But she would be leaving the house at 6 o'clock to get to work for 7 on the bus, of course, too. And then she would leave work at around 3:15, 3:30ish and be home, unless she was going to church to do a ladies ministry or a Bible study or family hour or whatever it is, like the different things that were happening at our church. And they just worked. They'd go from one thing to the other thing. My mom would go from cooking in the kitchen to clearing out the snow at the front of the yard, or if one of us boys weren't home, or maybe when I was too small, or go from the kitchen to vacuuming to cleaning the washrooms to cleaning up my room, to just work, busy body, always all over the place. And there wasn't much self-care. The only time I noticed when my mother stopped was when she had injured her back from helping a patient at Kennedy Lodge nursing home. And her friend from church came over to the house, and it was really bad, and was doing all kinds of stuff trying to help her to recuperate her strength and to probably work out the herniated discs or whatever she had in her back at that time. I was pretty young. But when that was over with, I'm sure she wasn't properly fully 100% healed, but she went back in. And I'm just saying, 37 years later, and she actually worked for maybe a year and a half to 2 years, just helping people around the neighborhood. Like there was one lady who hated me, by the way. Well, I don't know if she hated me, but we used to call her the flower lady. She lived across from us up here, and she valued her flowers. Unfortunately, she happened to be living smack dab in the middle of about 13 kids that like to play road hockey. So needless to say, eventually that tennis ball, orange puck is going to end up in your flowers. So therefore she was really guarded, and we were jerks. But anyhow, so that's probably why she didn't like me. Anyhow, that same lady, who was of another race and not white, not Chinese, my mother went and happened to be, by way of somebody else on the street, go over and help to try to rehabilitate that lady from what she was going through. I think she had a stroke or something. And she tried to help out, and she helped constantly until the lady did pass away. But after that, my mom worked for someone else, and she helped end of life care for someone else that we knew, that we were very close to. Um, After that, she was home, and her knee finally gave out, and she needed two half knee surgeries on her legs. And remember, she is retired at this point, but she's like 71. And anyhow, she gets her knees done at around maybe 72, 73. And then she gets something called aphasia, and she's basically no good to herself. My father's story was, my parents passed away at the same age, but far apart, because my dad was a lot older than my mom. But for my dad, he retired, um, didn't really do much. He was around the house, just chilling, relaxing, contemplating, talking, and just, doing old man stuff around the house. And then I think he already had Parkinson's, but that was basically the the story of his retirement. And he was also back and forth to church, running the men's group at our church, singing, preaching. He also had a side hustle job where he would sell something called Best Line, which I think merged into something called Amway. And basically, both of my parents just worked their tails off. And then when they stopped working, they both got severely ill. And there was no, I mean, my mom had a little more time with my kids, but my dad didn't. I have a picture with him holding my son. There's one where I have my daughter lying beside him, only because he literally couldn't do anything else, and probably didn't. I don't even know if he knew she was there. I think he did, but he wasn't able to hold her, you know. But these people worked really, really, really hard, and my point is that there wasn't much self care in any respect, except for care with their soul, with praying, with being a part of the church. And Christians always say, and it's been said in the scriptures, where it says only what you do for Christ will last. And I think my parents really, really took that to heart and didn't really concern themselves with anything else down here besides working, paying the bills, and going to church and witnessing and being a witness and preaching the gospel and nurturing the saints of the church. Admirable, wonderful. But I believe at the same time, while doing all that, you can take care of yourself. And of course, I can honestly attest to that. I didn't. I did to a certain extent, but yeah. Anyhow, that was just a little background. I'm sure you could probably hear that background full story somewhere else in the archives of my now 203 episodes of this podcast. Can't tell you where it is though, or what the episode's called, but you'd have to just go back. I'm sure I walked people through most of happenings, probably within the first year of my podcast, just because, I'm not an athlete, not a well-known musical artist or anything else. So I would have no choice if I wanted to run a podcast by myself, done in monologue style or answering question styles or whatever you want to say, without people knowing who I am. So I've given a lot of my backstory, really. So anyhow, I just wanted to say all that. So I will start this segment off again. They're small segments anyways. But first, why we feel guilty about prioritizing ourselves. Let's start with the real question. Why do people feel guilty about taking care of themselves? Why do we act like saying no is some kind of crime? The truth is, most of us were raised to believe that our worth is tied to how much we give to others. We were conditioned to believe that saying yes makes you a good person. Hustling 24/7 makes you hardworking. Being exhausted makes you dedicated, and you should feel full after it all. But at what cost? Studies show that chronic stress and overworking yourself actually makes you less productive, less creative, and more prone to burnout. People who never take breaks actually get less done over time because exhaustion kills your motivation, exhaustion kills your ability. Saying yes to everything waters down your energy and your focus. So the guilty Oh, sorry. So the quality, guilty. So the quality of what you give suffers. Think about it. How many times have you done something you didn't want to do just because you didn't want to seem selfish or lazy or someone who doesn't care or someone who doesn't want to help? And how did you feel afterwards? Now, I could honestly say that I definitely felt totally exhausted, many of those situations, but I did feel like, I did all that I could. So I guess I felt good about the work. But I can honestly say there was times and just around the house, had kids, whatever, um, spouse, whatever. And sometimes I would be out doing yard work by myself for 5 hours, 4 hours by myself, cutting front lawns, back lawns, sweeping up, washing this, washing that, maybe washing two or three cars by myself. Um, and meanwhile, everybody just stayed inside. Maybe they'd peek out, hey, want a drink? Um, but nobody really wanted to get their hands dirty. And I didn't put it on anyone that way because I knew what it was to do what I was doing. And I'm a kind of person, if you don't ask, or maybe better yet, if you don't just come out and start doing stuff with me, then I'm just going to assume that you don't want to help. And the bad thing about that is I think it becomes a cycle, and you probably turn into one of the people who pressure people with their bitterness, with their upsetness. Um, and I think people can feel it. And I think you could probably ask some of my family. There's probably times when they felt hopeless because they didn't know how, and maybe felt a little bit put off because maybe my attitude doing something or saying something after working hard wouldn't always be that great. I remember I had an argument with my sister one time about that, and it caused a big rift, I think, in our relationship, where I wasn't living at home and I passed by and some stuff needed to be taken care of, and just used to doing everything wherever I am all the time, a lot of time by myself, spending a lot of time. And that day it was like there was just a straw, the situation, just a straw that was placed on my back while I was doing all other amounts of things elsewhere. And I was doing something for my mom, my sister, my both my sisters, the household, but I was complaining all the way while doing it. Why? Not because I expected them all to be able to do it, but because I was miserable. And sometimes, people who are overworked, most of the time, they are miserable. Because if you're overworked, it means someone has either expected too much of you, or you've expected too much of yourself, or there are other people who should be available to be on hand to help or to do, but unfortunately it's put on you and you do it begrudgingly, which is really sad. And whatever blessing you're probably going to get out of it, you lose those blessings because of your attitude. And if you can't do something with a good attitude, you're probably better off just not doing it at all until you can have a good attitude about it. But of course, I know there's some stuff that just needs to be done, whether you feel good about it or not. But the worst thing I can honestly tell you from experience is just doing things because you have to, and doing them in a miserable way. Okay. Now I'm just going to move this thing down here. Sorry about that, people. I'm going to move it. I'm going to move it down. I'm just moving some of these attributes of this file a little bit farther down. All right, here we go. Good. I'm doing this kind of like on the fly. So a lot of the producing that I would normally do behind the scenes afterwards, you're kind of sitting in while I'm doing it. So, I mean, if you're a kind of person who likes to listen to podcasts on 1.5 times the speed, why not? I just know that if you have time, you're spending time, I'd rather somebody just spend time and take it all in, take the whole vibe in. And the vibe is slow sometimes, y'all. All right. 2, the power of setting boundaries. Heard this from someone the other day, and it's true. You got to set boundaries. You got to set professional, personal boundaries, and games are not a good idea. Just be straightforward, be honest, be upfront. And if you think you need to, just for the sake of it, share information that is not totally your own, you probably should just ask somebody. It will serve you well. Okay, here's the truth that a lot of people don't want to admit. Most of the time, people don't respect your boundaries because it's inconvenient for them, not because they're unreasonable. Boundaries aren't about pushing people away, they're about protecting your time, your energy, your mental health, and your life. 3 signs you need better boundaries. 1, you feel drained after spending time with certain people. 2, you say yes to things you immediately hate and regret. 3, did I say 3 already? I thought I said 3. Anyway, 2, that was 2. 3, you feel like people only come to you when they need something. Maybe they got a dump on you. They got to tell everything that happened to them, and they're not really into your life and what goes on with your life. Or if they ask you questions, which makes you feel like they care, a lot of time the questions they have are only in what's this? How do I say it? Only in regards to how whatever it is you have to say or whatever you think or whatever you've been through affects them. Just for an example of how maybe they need to deal with the situation. So they compare it that way. They're not really like asking, how was your day yesterday for real? When they're asking, some people are asking, how was your day yesterday? All they're automatically going to do is compare it to theirs and bring it home that way. And, but they're not just saying, how are you doing? What did you do? Because they care about how you're doing and what did you really do. They just want to know what you did. And they assume that you're probably okay. And anyhow, there are some people who really actually care though, guys. So just letting you know, just in case you're wondering. Okay, so how to set boundaries without feeling like a jerk. Be direct. I don't have the bandwidth for that right now. That's an answer you can give somebody. Or you can say, stop over explaining. Well, I'll tell you to stop over explaining. You don't owe people a 5-minute excuse as to why you don't want to do something or why you can't do something. You can just simply say no. Remember, boundaries don't push people away. They filter out the ones who only benefit from your exhaustion. It's sad though, because I know sometimes we put a lot of time and energy behind people we really, really, really care about. Sadly, when you're a doer, when you're a person who handles things, you'll find that a lot of the people you do things for really could care less about how you feel or how exhausted you are. The people who get mad at your boundaries were the ones benefiting from your lack of boundaries. 3, the mind-body connection. Most people think of self-care as something extra, like it's a luxury. But let's be clear, self-care isn't an indulgence, it's maintenance. It's the difference between running smoothly and breaking down. Key facts. Studies show that chronic stress increases your risk of heart disease, depression, and even memory loss because you're just being burnt out. Burnout isn't just mental, it's physically changing your brain, your body, making it hard to function. You wouldn't let your car run on empty on purpose, would you? So why do we let ourselves run on fumes when we have nothing left and we need someone to give in to us? It's not a good look. You know, I remember times where I was doing anything and everything for other people. Did they care? Maybe. Did they say thank you? Maybe, let's see, 50% of the time? No. Did they factor it in a lot of the time when you were unable to do other things or things for yourself? No. It was just expected. And there are people, sadly, who believe that it's okay for you to be totally exhausted and have nothing for yourself. Now, I am of the camp that I believe a man should, you have a wife, you have kids. I believe a man should be willing to give his last, his everything for his family, for his wife, for his kids. But I also believe that those same people should want to nurture this man who is working hard for them. It shouldn't be a big deal to rub his back or his feet. It shouldn't be a big deal to help him cut the grass. It shouldn't be a big deal to come out and help dad shovel the snow. It shouldn't be a big deal for a man to ask for, say, intimacy in his relationship that, his God given right, or as the scripture says, your body is not your own, but your wife's, and her body is not her own, it's her husband's. And there's some truth to that. But for whatever reason, people get in there with their manipulations of the scriptures and leave place for this, leave place for that, work yourself to the bone, and I can make choices if I want to care for you in certain ways. Somehow there's little loopholes in these agreements, which there really isn't. But when there's a will, there's a way. When somebody doesn't want to do something, they can find an excuse to help them not do that thing. The myths about self-care. Check this out. Myth. Self-care is selfish because it has the word self in it. No, that's not true. Truth. If you don't take care of yourself, you'll have nothing left to give. And there's many times when I literally, and I don't know why I'm saying the word literally, but there's been times when I worked myself to the bone, and by the not even next day, by the evening when it's time to go to bed, severe allergies because I'm allergic to things outside, severe back pain and ankle and feet pain, and just thinking about the home. The house looked beautiful, but my body was all ripped up. And sometimes I would do stuff like that to impress my family, but nobody was ever really that impressed. Nobody was gonna look at your lawn from the right angle and see all the work you did. You rolled it, or you you striped it, or whatever it is. These different things. People don't care. You know what I mean? I'd cut my grass and people would walk by in the neighborhood and say, "Man, you have the best lawn on the street." And that was kind of cool. But I wish that, not even that somebody would say it in my house, but there was some sort of value put towards the hard work I did to beautify our home. And I guess that would only be spouse wise, but I mean, there was things that I was doing a lot of the time that nobody else except for me really cared about. And I never saw that. you know? Sometimes you get in this ridiculous way where you believe that other people believe what you believe the same way you believe it. And I think that's the jewels of life. If you can find someone who actually cares about what you care about. Because when you're working hard for doing those things, maybe in the way that you do them, then they might be properly valued. Myth: saying no makes you a bad friend, a bad spouse, a bad employee. Truth: saying yes to everything makes you an exhausted and resentful person. Bitterness: I've seen people washing dishes who always wash the dishes and nobody else helping them, and acting all meek and mild, but inside it's like there's embers of resentment just building up. um, Myth: rest is for the weak. Truth: rest is how you stay strong, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Here's the problem. Well, I guess it's not the problem. Here's the bottom line. If someone gets mad at you for taking care of yourself, they were never really on your side to begin with. And I guess because this is a short episode, closing thoughts, man, closing thoughts, whatever. All right. So here's the takeaway. Self-care is not an excuse. It's not laziness. It's not selfishness. It's survival and it's strategy. It's you don't take care of yourself, no one else will. And people will let you work yourself to the bone. Start setting boundaries. If you can't do it, you can't do it. If you say no, no is just no. Stop feeling guilty about taking a break. Remember, taking care of yourself isn't a luxury. It's the only way to actually keep going. And that's why you shouldn't let people around you, people you love, work themselves to the bone. Insist on others taking breaks. Insist on helping when it looks like they don't want you to help, because sometimes they do and they're just being a martyr. Sad but true. If this episode hit home, share it, please. Tag a friend and say, yo, man, check this out. All right. I really appreciate everybody who listens to this podcast. All these episodes of me rambling on, some a little bit more in sync than others. But I do appreciate you checking me out, and hopefully you continue. Anyhow, till next time, this is MCM, and you're listening to You're Probably Right podcast. Take care. Remember, this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Even if you're just laughing at me, I'm good. Take care. Bye. Oh, yeah, before I go, remember, if you have any questions you want to ask or maybe have a topic that you want me to talk about, you can email me at yprpodcast@gmail.com. Take care. Hey, come check out You're Probably Right podcast. Society is getting more unpredictable every day, but at the same time, predictable in its unpredictability. Say that 4 times real fast. Come with me as I attempt to find clarity in all the fog while staying way outside the box and kicking the box way down the road with my size 12 dogs. I use the Bible, experience, education, fortune, misfortune, life's lessons, life's mistakes to sort through all the mess. I talk about news, God, God, self-help, sports, sickness, health, music, parenting, love, humbleness, hurt, pain, joy, and all the things that might make you say, I never thought of it that way. Hopefully, anyway. Also, I take a stab at answering tough and not so tough questions, and all the while understand that, listen, sometimes you end up in the hot seat and there's no thermostat. Well, that's how it is here. And because there's no topic, very few topics off the table, Torontonians will understand that Doug Ford reference there. Hopefully the podcast will be helpful and uplifting. And hey, maybe you'll find your own private Idaho here somewhere. Hope to see you soon.